learn and they start to develop those experiences. When I was teaching the first year in an undergrad class, I didn't do a great job. I'd never taught undergrads before. Graduate students are super self-directed, they know where they're going, they know what they want to do, and those are who I taught. And undergrads need a lot more scaffolding. And I gave them all the big paper, and I had really, really broad spectrum of results from that experience. I was like, wow. Like, some students were writing thesis level work, and then some students were like, Wikipedia says, and I was like, oh wow, okay. That was me, that was on me as their professor, that I hadn't done a very good job of working with them on this. And so I learned that I needed to break the paper into 4 sections, teach it during the course of the semester, and then I would say to them all, if I give you feedback, if I talk to you about this, if you have any concerns, come find me and we'll work through this. And then if you publish everything that we've done in those 4 sections, you'll get an A in that paper. And it was amazing to see those students who come and say, I hated writing papers, it would freak me out. Every time a teacher would say I have a big paper, I'd get a huge, I get so anxious and stressed out. And the amount of students who would tell me, I can't write papers, coming into those undergrad classes. And how in the past 4 years of teaching that class, that has shifted fundamentally to students saying, I'm going to use these skills that you've taught me next time I write a paper. I'm going to use these skills you've taught me when I go into navigating situations like this. And it wouldn't just be about the writing, but I'd also kind of talk to students about that kind of your sense of self, what your capabilities are. Because often we'll resist navigating challenges because we're concerned about what that looks like, what that feels like, and what that might result in for us as people. And so I always say to people, embrace those challenges, go out there, take risks, fortune favors the brave, as long as you're okay with the fact that it's going to be it's a roller coaster process in my experience when you embrace challenges. But it makes life more interesting and a more vibrant experience. Okay. And the other big thing is kind of just thinking about how to take measurements. When I worked in disability adjustment, a challenge could be for some people that I worked with, learning to hold the cup again. Learning to be able to feed yourself again. And so that's the other thing to be mindful of, is that what a challenge looks like for myself, what a challenge looks like for any of you, is going to be different. I don't want to be prescriptive about what that looks like for people. Whatever that challenge is for me, getting my nails done would be a challenge, because I've never in my entire life, except when I was married Tom, had my nails done. Not something that I'm interested in, but I had a girlfriend of mine I went to college with who used to constantly try and coax me in to beautician parlors. And the idea, for me, the challenge is sitting for that period of time just does not work. But take measurements. Be thoughtful about this. It's not an all or nothing. These are like character building experiences. And, we can learn as we take those measurements of how we look at our futures, how we look at the world. And every time you have a success, it's really just that small step on your story. Now I'm going to talk a little bit, because of the professor in me, about exercises that you can do when you're really at that point, because sometimes this will happen for me, where I have a lot of things coming at me, a lot of work requirements or expectations, and I'm like trying to navigate the fact that there's a lot of information that I have. And I'll do this exercise where I'll draw a circle, and the inner circle, the green one, I'll write the things that I can control, what I know I can control. And then in the purple circle, I will put the things that I can influence. And then in the blue circle, I'll put everything else. If I'm dealing with a lot, this is my equivalent of writing the list. And then what I will do is I will focus on the purple circle, the things that I can influence. Because I already know that I've got the green circle. And so I'll start to figure out, okay, is this something that I need to be talking about in the team dynamic? Is this something that I need to be talking about with my family? Is there a colleague, a co-worker, or is there a social situation that I need to be navigating in that things I can influence circle? And that's the area that I work on when I'm trying to manage a variety of issues at the same time. And so it's just a suggestion of practice that you can sometimes utilize. And for me, it helps me manage when I feel like there's a lot going on. Okay. I'm not sure where I'm at time-wise right now.
You're okay.
Good. Okay, next one. So the biggest takeaway that I want you guys to have from this is that the most critical part of this experience for me, thinking about resilience, is I think one of the ways in which we can build resilience is by relying on each other, by creating those opportunities for building a sense of self-efficacy in one another. And also understanding that sometimes when you see people, there's going to be times when you obviously see people where offering that affirmation, observing those strengths and successes is going to be evidently necessary. But I would say generalize that practice. Generalize that practice to everyone you meet. And then also be willing and comfortable with letting people support you. You know, don't be British. Because I'm equally Irish and British. Irish people tend to have a tempestuous response, whereas British people tend to be very polite and self-efficacy. And as you can see, I put a lot of community pictures from your website into this slide, because you do have that sense of community, you know. And it can happen in your faith community, but it also can happen beyond that. And I know for me that there's those fundamental stories throughout my life. And it's not just family, it's been teachers, it's been community members. You know, I have a variety of stories that are too long for today, that have contributed in small incremental ways to my sense of self and who I am and where I belong in the world. You know, and one of the challenges of traveling a lot with my dad's career is that often we would have to redefine that community, kind of equivalent to being in the military, every time we moved and reconnected with people. The advantage of that is have a certain amount of adaptability. The disadvantage of that, as my husband's been aware of, I get itchy feet about every 5 years. Which I've largely overcome in my later years, but you know, for the first few years we were married, we had to navigate. But it's okay to reflect and consider what you learn from those adverse experiences. But it's okay also to accept those positive things, those encouragements that you get from people around you. I think sometimes we have a tendency to perseverate on the past. But for me, one of the things that working with somebody and actually having a counselor that I worked with who talked to me about, you know, Bandura, and then having a professor who helped me learn about it, it really helped me reframe my perspective, because Bandura looked at that kind of building our sense of selves, building our sense of self-efficacy. And I really believe that having a sense of self-efficacy allows us, when we're faced with adversity, when we're faced with a challenge, to go into it moving forward, for want of a better way of expressing it, rather than trying to resist it or avoid it. And so that's really all I have to say today. How did I do time-wise? Am I too short?
I could ask for a couple of questions.
Yes. Does anyone have any questions for me? Yes.
I just want to say I didn't know all of her story today, which is interesting, and I actually kind of choked me up. I was picturing you sitting in a corner. But you know, the target thing that you showed, when I first looked at it, I like to think that the center is the part I can't control. And so, like, if you were shooting as an archer, you can control the outside. You have some influence in the in-ring, but you're trying to hit the target. You're just trying to. So I don't know, that seemed meaningful to me.
Yeah, and I don't want to be prescriptive about that, because I do think, again, it's everyone's journey. And so what that looks like for you, how you want to design that circle, is really very much an individual experience. You know, it's just kind of what I do to help manage my day-to-day. But I think for everyone else, that may be something that they want to adapt for their own method.
that having had some experience in the past, we can draw from that. I was sitting on my couch in my living room, and, you know, really no prospect of anything other than a Zoom interaction for some time. And to an extrovert, that's difficult. But I thought, oh, you've been through some difficult times in your life. Toward the end of my marriage, when things weren't working out and I was feeling isolated, I found a support group. I was able to get involved with a group of other people, and I thought, you can get through this, you know. I felt sorrier for, you know, the teenagers that maybe had not had that life experience to bring to it, you know. And from what I'm hearing, it is they're struggling, actually, you know, coming back into seeing people again, that they have not really been interacting with people as much, so.
Yeah, I think actually in education, one of our big challenges is going to be over the next few years. How do we start to regain that sense of self-efficacy? And that could be in terms of how you socialize with others, how you navigate that, how do you interact with people, what are the rules? You know, and it seems like a fairly simplistic thing, but it's not always, you know, because we don't, one of the things that you use to make those connections is that sense of, here's my background, here's things I like, here's things I do. You know what I mean? How many times do we introduce ourselves by defining our hobbies or our experiences? And if the past 2 years, everybody's like, well, I spent 2 years doing very little and not interacting with people. That doesn't, you know what I mean? So I agree. There's challenges in education that we're going to be figuring out how to build. And we're certainly, you know, I know on our campus we've been having a lot of conversations about that. Go ahead.
Well, the isolation of the pandemic was severe, and I was so anxious to meet up with people because, on the one hand, in my community at Crow, we lost a lot of people to COVID, and I became overly. I don't mean to say overly, but I treasured those who survived, and I wanted to see them. And then when I did, it was like I couldn't hold I couldn't hold any. I couldn't hold back my enthusiasm. My kids were so embarrassed because I would be so excited to see people, and I still am. And last night I was at a basketball game, and this one gentleman extended his hand to me, and he said, "We're still alive, and you look good." I had thought the same thing about him, and I thought, oh, this is not socially appropriate. But it's just, I feel like my skills are really weird and odd and fuzzy, and I can't seem to really get them focused in. And I want to jump, you know, and say, hey, I'm so glad to see you, but it's just, maybe overly. So I mean, I feel like I'm
Out of practice.
Out of practice, yeah.
I had exactly the same feeling in the sense that, so I do understand that I get excited and I tend to, which I didn't today, but talk really, really fast. So when I get excited, and I tend to, and then my husband has had to humor the fact that then I'll say things that are inappropriate because I'm excited. You know what I mean? And I'll have to kind of figure out, and often by the time I figure out I need to pull back, it's already out there.
Yeah.
You know, and then that goes back to that. And I agree, this is where experience helps, is we know that we could do it, we've done it. We'll get back to that. It'll happen. And it may take some time, and then understanding that we're all experiencing, I think, that little bit of like, how do we do this? And, oh, I'm so happy to see you. And let me tell you the entire life story that I've had for the past 2 years. And blah, 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 blah. People are like, whoa. Go ahead.
But don't you think in a way you've had a chance to think about where you wished you could have gone and who you could have talked to and where you could have been? And maybe we should be reconsidering some of it. Why should we return to the way it was? And I also think that too. I mean, it's kind of in the mix.
Yeah.
You know?
I really do. I've thought about it a lot, like in terms of how to, so I really have come to a perspective, and I don't know if this is a sign of like where I'm transitioning to in my age and my life, but like, how do I offer affirmations? How do I had a colleague, her name was Wanda Mitchell, who worked in the Division for Inclusive Excellence at VCU. And I'd always heard people talk about the phrase of you know, make sure you look to the people behind you and bring them up with you. And it was one of those things that, you know, I was like, yeah, it's really aspirational, great, you know, we should do that. But she was the first person who really challenged me about how are you doing it, when are you doing it, who are you doing it with? And as a consequence of her interactions with me, I mentored 2 students who were in the rehabilitation counseling program that I graduated from. They became interns at the programs that I was working at. And I really engaged in like a conscientious effort to start doing that type of work. But I needed that challenge.
Thank you, Ryan.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
We are going to sing hymn 163, and I just feel like this, I love this song. It is for the earth forever turning. It just ties in with, to me, what we are talking about. Well, Joyce, don't play an intro, just go and we'll sing all 4 verses, because I love the words in this, so whatever we do, you know.
Well, I can't leave out
There
the
is an
intro.
intro though.
Pardon me?
There's gotta be.
There's a
I-
lovely intro.
I have to do it.
Okay,
I
okay,
can't
go
stop
for it.
myself. The notes are calling me.
Can't say that to a pianist.
I just, thank you. That was one of the things that I have started doing this is coming out of the pandemic. I mean, I said thank you here and there and please and all that sometimes. But I really have focused on doing that all the time. And I'm around now people that had a very different idea of how you should approach the pandemic than I did. You know, I've had all the shots they would give me, basically. And some of these people had none of them, or maybe one. And now that we're past, I mean, we're not past it totally because but it's not as severe. I feel more comfortable being around people. And so I'm always thanking people people that wait on me that I might not have before, because I'm happy they're there. I'm happy they're doing that. And and, you know, and the please, and, you know, such simple things, but I think it's one of the things that I've done. We'd like to share our